This is P&W, Haunts and Homicides.
Yeah, it is. I feel like we always say that. Yeah, it is.
Yeah. As if people were confused. They're like, but is it really?
Is it? Are you sure?
Pretty sure. Most days.
Most days.
I don't take anything for granted. You know what they say about assuming?
What do they say?
It makes an ass out of you and me. She knew that. She was just...
I was testing you.
Okay. Fair enough. Look at you with that shuffle.
It's hard.
Okay.
Are you channeling?
It's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot to channel today. Be forewarned. I think we always say we're not really going to do trigger warnings.
But then we do anyway.
We kind of, well, this one's sort of a special case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, she has no idea. Okay, shuffle one more time and then I'm going to cut them and I will draw my card. I like that you are the one that has to shuffle my deck because I really struggle with my own.
Yeah.
This one is, we love it, but it's a challenge. Thank you, Patrick. Okay, so we have the Emperor in reverse.
Ooh.
Let's see about that.
The Emperor. Is it a woman? It's the Empress. Do they have an Empress too? I bet they do.
This one, I think that pretty much all of the characters are female regardless.
Yeah.
Because it's,
As
modern witch tarot, but...
As it should be.
Well, okay, so look at the difference in the picture on this one. This looks like the stereotypical emperor versus this bad bitch. She has ram horns and a very sexy staff.
I like it.
And she's really rocking that power suit. I'm not gonna lie.
She is.
Yeah.
Okay. In the reverse, the Emperor. Benevolence, compassion, credit, also confusion to enemies, obstruction, immaturity.
Okay. All right.
It's not a very lengthy...
We may have to look at some other interpretations when we go back to talk about this later.
Yeah.
Okay.
See. In the non-reverse, it's like stability, power, protection, realization, a great person, aid, reason, conviction, also authority and will. So
okay, so when you read the traditional meaning with the card right side up, it makes total sense. It kind of illuminates it. So I'll explain that later.
Okay. Do you want me to read the meaning on this?
Yeah, let's.
And just see,
let's go in the little book and see.
Think about it being, kind of the opposite of
Yeah.
what I'm reading. So, boundaries and structure make us feel safe. The Emperor is full of authority and creates a world full of rules and laws. She is a comforting answer to the chaos of the natural world, but she is rigid and uncompromising in her stony throne. She requires logic and reason above all else, and she is unafraid to lead and take the reins to shape the world around her. Though she lords over a powerful grand cityscape, the river of life has slowed to a trickle behind her.
Ooh.
Okay. Interesting. There is a second paragraph.
Ooh.
So protect yourself if you need to. Don't allow others to walk all over you, and don't be afraid to stand up, take charge, and force change. Logic and reason may be the best approach for a particular problem, and by creating some stability in your life, you may be able to release some anxiety. Don't lose touch with your compassion, though. Stubbornness and, I don't know this word. I'm going to hand it to Caitlin.
Stoicism will not always be the best answer. So this says stubbornness and stoicism will not always be the best answer. Wow. Honestly, no matter what we read about this card, I really can kind of... There's some touch points here.
Oh,
okay.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Whew.
So keep this in mind, y'all, as we go through the case.
Okay. So this is a case from Oregon.
Oh.
And I'm just going to start at the top and say that we've got 2 episodes related to all of the content that I could find when I obsessively researched on this. And it's going to be interesting. So we'll talk about the case and the victims today, but we have kind of some other things related to the court case specifically, and then some other news that will hopefully kind of lighten the load emotionally on this one, because it's a tough one. So episode 2 is your feel better part.
So this is like a 2-parter.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you sprung it on me.
I did. Yeah. Don't expect to feel better today, though.
Great. Okay.
Yeah. So there we go. Dayton Leroy Rogers, also known as the Molalla forest killer and a huge dick, apparently literally. But
he has a huge dick? Or,
if you want to know more about that, you'll have to do your own independent research, because I can't with this man or his manhood.
I'm furiously Googling right now. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, there's through all of my research, there's several accounts related to his apparent size, and I just was like, I cannot think of anything that I care less about.
Yeah.
I was much happier when I imagined his tiny shriveled penis. So
definitely doesn't deserve to be blessed.
No. So Dayton Leroy Rogers committed arguably the most infamous chain of homicides in Oregon. 7 female victims in 3 months.
7 in 3 months?
Mm-hmm. He was born in Moscow, Idaho, September 30th, 1953. And you know who I thought of the whole time I was writing my case notes?
Who?
Who spent a lot of time in Moscow, Idaho?
I don't know.
I know you don't know. Rye.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
God.
She's like, I don't want anything to do with this, I'm sure. But
oh, that's terrifying.
hey, Rye, I love you.
Did you tell her?
Mm-mm-mm.
Call her.
No forewarning. I'll send her the app after we're done. Let her know. She can tell us to edit it out. She's like, I want nothing to do with all that. So this sack of shit of a human, he has a criminal background dating back to the age of about 16.
Eek.
Yeah, it
started early.
Yeah, and honestly, there were accounts of what I would categorize as probably troubling behavior that didn't necessarily rise to the occasion of truly criminal until he was 16. I won't probably go into anything that wasn't technically classified as criminal. There's just so much to unpack. So he was caught with a friend shooting at passing cars, apparently trying to break the windshields.
Just casual Tuesday.
Yeah, you know. Does everyone not do that? At age 19, it seems his behavior escalated to more violent crime. Because that's typically the progression.
Yeah.
I don't make this up, guys. There's some debate, depending on the source, whether this crime was perpetrated against his girlfriend at the time or just a young girl that he was on a second date with. So I don't know why seems so difficult to clarify.
That's
but
a big thing. Like second date or girlfriend.
Yeah. And I feel like either way it would be horrific, but I feel that context is kind of, I feel like that's kind of important. But
yeah.
Either way, he was on a date with a 15-year-old girl in Eugene, Oregon when he attacked and stabbed her. Now, remember, he's 19 at this point. So already I'm getting kind of an ooky vibe that he's, going out with a 15-year-old.
Yeah.
I'm going to put that aside because it was a different time and I'm not going to justify it, but I'm just going to move on. At the time of this attack, he had been married for less than a month.
Who's getting married at 19? All these
And then still dating 15-year-olds, I have to add.
Oh, God. I'm like, it's fine that you're dating, but why are you married?
She's like, marriage, I just don't understand.
Sorry, guys, I don't.
So he pled guilty to the lesser charge of second-degree assault. and received 4 years probation.
Wouldn't that be like attempted murder?
You're
freaking stabbing somebody?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's just assault.
I feel like what's getting lost here is he received 4 years of probation.
Ew.
It's really gross. Which, I mean, seems fair for a violent attack against a minor, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally fair.
Cool. Apparently not having learned his lesson at age 20, he attacked 2 teenage girls with a beer bottle. Yeah. In this case, the prosecution petitioned the court to revoke his probation, but the judge had a much better idea. The judge found him not guilty by reason of insanity, and Rogers was committed to the Oregon State Hospital in March of 1974. He was released before the end of that same year.
What the fucking fuck?
Yeah.
What was his reason for being insane? Do you have all that info?
Well, he stabbed 2 girls. He must have been crazy.
He cray.
Yeah. No, I don't really have a solid statement from the judge to back up his opinion on that. But yeah. Okay. So the good news is, though, when he was released, he met his now ex-wife, good for you, girl, Sherry Miller, just 3 months later, and they were married in October of 1975.
Wow.
Yeah, so already seems like there is a bit of a pattern developing of problems in the romance department, Mr. Rogers.
I assume he divorced his first wife.
Yeah, somewhere in all of the hullabaloo, yeah. He found some time to get that taken care of, I guess.
Crazy.
So just 2 months after his marriage to Sherry, he raped an 18-year-old girl.
Ew.
Yeah. Despite being indicted in January, he remained free pending his trial in May. Did he lock it up at least until after his trial?
Probably not.
I mean, come on, that would be too easy, right?
Yeah.
So in February, he assaulted 2 additional teenage girls and raped one of them. So what I read in an account sort of detailing what these girls went through, one of the girls basically she saw the writing on the wall about how quickly this situation turned and was really scared for her friends. And I think she was the older of the 2 girls, and she basically pled with him, you can do whatever you want to me, just don't hurt her.
Oh my God. That breaks my heart.
I know.
Oh.
The details of some of these, it's literally going to rip you in half. So
what a freaking literal angel. Oh my God.
I know. It's pretty incredible, and he's pretty awful. So he pled guilty again because of mental disease, to which I say, okay, let's get this man situated in a lifetime warranty padded cell.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because obviously you keep fucking letting him out and he's doing the same thing.
You're like, I'm not seeing a pattern here at all.
Just because he's mentally ill doesn't mean it's okay for him to go out and keep doing these things.
Yeah. Like, maybe if we've identified this behavior as being a pattern, should we change how we're handling this situation?
Probably.
Nah, dude.
It's
the 70s. No.
It seems too common sense, like the fact that we have to sit here and say that.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I'm talking to an idiot.
Yeah.
Which you guys are not.
Yeah.
So, oh my God.
Whoever sentenced him kind of seems like an idiot in hindsight.
Sure. Yeah.
So now in May, deep breath, creepy people, he was acquitted of the December rape charge, followed by his parole being revoked in June for the older knife attack. In truly fun fashion, Dayton Leroy Rogers then spent the rest of his summer just racking up acquittals.
Oh my God.
Like in August, when it came through for the latest rape charge. He was, however, convicted of 2 counts of coercion and then sentenced to 5 years.
What the fuck is coercion?
So I guess that's something. Not really sure why we can't basically convict him of the crimes that he's committed, and why are we reducing charges? Still just really, I can't quite wrap my head around that one.
No.
I'm not going to try because it just gets worse. Rogers was paroled in January of 1982 after having served 5.5 years, and just 1 year later, his parole supervision was terminated.
Why? Like, why?
I don't know. It's like, guys. It's not like we need to keep an eye on him or anything. He doesn't have a clear and escalating pattern of violent behaviors. This is fine.
That's what they thought. Like,
apparently. So,
oh goodness.
As per usual, I think that this is a case of someone that totally skipped, jumped, and probably outright hopped and laughed at the cracks in the system until his overconfidence led him to slip up.
Good.
Yeah.
I mean, not good. He shouldn't have had the chance to do that.
No, he absolutely shouldn't have. So this is literally just an accounting of the crimes that he's committed as a teenager and in his 20s.
Yeah.
His early 20s. So
and then that's it, right? We can go.
Yeah,
that's
no,
it.
we're done. That's it.
Case closed.
Just kidding. It's not a two-parter.
Oops, that was probably loud. Sorry, guys.
So, law enforcement in Oregon had previously encountered brutal crimes in the 1960s when Jerry Bruto shocked them all with his prolific crimes.
Remember him? Remember that
Fucking
little guy?
Jerry. Jerry. So, still it seems, though, that in some respects, they were wholly unprepared for a criminal like Rogers. Really. I really think that he's kind of a different breed. Although, we will probably kind of touch on this a little bit, but the one similarity for sure is that these two both had the foot thing going on with their crimes, which not here to yuck your yum, but I do think that's interesting.
If it's attached to violent crimes,
right.
A foot fetish is not good.
Yeah, that's where it really goes south for me. Again, not a kink shame thing here.
If you just want to suck on some toes and be, and not commit violent crimes, go for it.
Yeah,
but
if he had just sucked on the toes, we wouldn't be here.
Just suck on those toes.
Yeah. So, Dayton Leroy Rogers was well known in the Woodburn and Canby areas. And even somewhat likable, apparently.
No, of course.
I'm sure this was pretty horrifying to many in retrospect. So there's actually a couple of, when I was doing all of my research and I listened to a whole audiobook on this guy in addition to the articles and videos and really went down a rabbit hole on this one, but I was like, wait, these two roads are like out, like in the country and can be like out. Near enough to my parents' house that I'm like, I recognize that road.
Oh,
I recognize the name.
That is scary.
It's pretty weird. I didn't care for it.
You never do.
Yeah. I'm like, I get that he was a serial killer in Oregon, but God, does he have to ruin all the places I frequent?
Yes.
He really did. He really does. It's a thing.
That was his ultimate goal.
I guess. For most of this, I wasn't even alive. Until Dayton Leroy Rogers committed a brutal series of murders, it has been said that Brudos was the record holder for the most victims attributed to a single killer in Oregon. That's, of course, only true of the known serial killers. It's always possible that there are some operating that, we haven't identified a pattern yet. When they finally caught on to Dayton Leroy Rogers. Dayton Leroy Rogers. This three name thing. Mm-hmm. This man with like all of the I don't care for it. It holds true what people say about like don't trust a man with two first names or a guy with like 3 or 4 names. Like why? Why are we doing this? Okay, so when they finally caught him, we're going to go him.
Okay.
Many suspected he may have more victims. There's even some speculation about actually to this day.
Really?
Yes.
Oh.
So I'm not going to dive too deep on that because I think that there's a lot that they're just not really able to substantiate at this point. That was already so long ago. It's literally like we've lived our whole lives up to this point and it happened before we were born.
Yeah.
So But back then, they thought some of the murders commit by Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
Never heard of him.
Yeah.
Who's that? Who dat?
Familiar? Yeah. New number, who dis? They actually thought that some of those crimes might have been committed by Rogers.
Ooh.
So
wow.
Interesting. Yeah. So again, you see where kind of until they really are able to sort of identify the specific MO and kind of figure out the patterns in some of these cases where it's anyone's guess. You know, they thought maybe this one guy is responsible for all of these rather than there being two active, serial killers. And there's some overlap. Their victims fit the same profile. Ooh. Very common for serial killers that their profiles overlap to varying degrees. And they operated in somewhat nearby areas.
Huh.
It's possible that what law enforcement learned from the Rogers case was actually helpful when it became clear they were looking for another serial killer.
Interesting.
And when I say possible, I think highly probable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have like a wild theory.
Okay.
Do you think they were working together?
I don't think so. I don't think there's any evidence that these two knew each other.
I don't care if there's any evidence, Caitlin. I am saying
speculate.
What if they were?
Yeah.
Wild.
You never know. I mean, anything's possible.
Throwing it out there.
Yeah.
I called it first, y'all.
Yeah. It's interesting because I was talking about this case as I was going through the first set of notes for the first episode. And someone was like, have you guys ever thought about, reaching out to these guys? I wonder if you could interview them.
Oh, fuck
Have you ever
no.
thought about writing them letters?
No.
I was like, I just don't know that I have any burning questions for most of these guys that can't be answered by a quick Goog.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
We're not freaking
hard pass.
Like criminal reporters or like
no. Yeah. I'm not sure that I'm looking to
investigators.
get that invested.
No, I'm good.
No.
I'm good.
Yeah.
I could go my whole life without talking to
Yeah.
a serial killer.
Do I not already have to sage this apartment enough?
Yeah. We don't need that kind of energy in our lives.
I really don't. I have so much going on here already. So in Ridgway's case, the police were able to gain some trust and cooperation from the female sex workers, which proved to be helpful in solving his case later. So what they learned, I think, kind of to summarize from the Dayton Leroy Rogers case, was that in a lot of communities, the sex workers realize that they are on the other side from law enforcement, and they work very hard to try to protect each other.
Yeah.
And they talk and they share stories and they build their own kind of community. So they were able to identify, hey, in this circle, in this community, we're seeing a pattern of, this particular guy or this particular truck or whatever. And that's part of what sealed the deal for Mr. Gary.
Yeah, that's awesome that they were able to do
Yeah.
that and then share it.
Yeah. I mean, because what they found was, in hindsight, with Dayton Leroy Rogers, is they're like, wait, all of these girls were seeing a pattern.
Yeah.
And a lot of them knew to stay away from this guy because they figured it's
Ooh.
just a matter of time before he really escalates.
Oh my God.
Really scary. So
Yeah.
they realized after the fact, like, wow, we have this incredible resource where these girls can kind of tell us. They've got obviously their finger on the pulse, and anybody that they're starting to identify these, violent patterns
Yeah.
with, why can't we work with them to try to protect?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was really cool. I think that, it's sad that, at this point we had to learn after the fact, but I think that was kind of some of the takeaway from this case.
Yeah.
So, Dayton's modus operandi was to pick up sex workers and take them to secluded areas where he would torture and mutilate them before eventually killing them.
No.
Yeah. So creepy. I used to work out in Molalla, and I kept thinking about all the times that I've driven through kind of that community, and I was like, wow, it gives it such a different color, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's interesting. I love Molalla. I think it's a beautiful part of Oregon, but man, that really gave me the creepies. The forested areas he often offered a really good cover for both his crimes. So while he's torturing them, while he's, basically hurting them, and they might be, screaming or struggling to get away, but also for the disposal of bodies.
Oh.
So he drove a blue Nissan pickup, which apparently some knew very well to steer clear of. They literally knew the vehicle.
That's crazy.
In the group of these sex workers.
They blacklisted him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh.
So it has been reported that amongst some of the sex workers, he was known to be into some really violent, kinky bondage play, as well as using knives.
Jesus.
Yeah. And then, of course, there's the element where some of these women didn't find him particularly threatening because it seemed like he just, had a little bit of a foot fetish. And if occasionally, instead of sucking on the toe, he's biting it a little bit harder than usual, they thought, that if that's the worst of it, I can live with that.
Okay.
I cannot live with that.
No thanks.
Yeah.
I'm hiding my toes at the moment.
No one touch my feet. I know. I'm going to sit crisscross applesauce now up in my chair. So many of the sex workers that were familiar with him had actually nicknamed him Steve the Gambler. So what's interesting about this is that he did use an alias. He would typically tell these women that his name was Steve. So Steve the Gambler. There you go.
Makes sense.
But honestly, there were still some of these women that were really either unaware or just truly desperate. As we'll see in the final victim, which is really his undoing. Spoiler alert. Some of these women were desperate because of a drug habit. We'll find that some of these women are not just supporting their drug habit, they're supporting the drug habit of a partner, whether that's a boyfriend or a pimp. So there's a lot of pressure for them to produce income. So they're going to be behaving in ways that maybe are a little bit riskier. And I think that's where we get into a pattern of sort of victim blaming with sex workers because they do engage in these behaviors that on top of, sex work, which is just inherently dangerous in many ways, they're engaging in behaviors on top of that it smacks of desperation. And we're thinking, well, why would you ever do that? But in a lot of situations, people are making choices not based on the ideal situation. So
but they, we know they still don't deserve to be murdered.
No.
No one deserves that no matter what you're doing in your life.
Right. And if anything, this really just reinforced for me that it's really important to address the language that we use when we're talking about these women. I'll share. There's a little bit of backstory around kind of that comment. One of the things that I made a concerted effort to do was really to be pointed in my language about the women, because I do feel like, and we'll get to it, in some of my notes, I'm going to quote directly, and we're going to see some terms that, maybe aren't the worst of what these women are called, but where it kind of hurts my heart because I feel like there's already enough negative language and dehumanization around that, around, how we talk about them, how, we talk about how they lived, that I just felt like it was really important to point that out and be cognizant of it. This case in particular really just made me kind of hyper aware of well, we'll get into it.
Yeah.
I just, you get what I'm saying.
I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. there are so many like interesting conversations that I've had through the course of researching for this case that I'm like, from a male perspective, from a female perspective, and you know, the language matters because how we speak about someone relates to how they feel about themselves. It relates to how society at large treats them. I guess that's the main takeaway for me is like, if we dehumanize someone, it reinforces the idea that it's okay to do that, to treat them that way.
Yeah, and they might not seek help. They might not think other people want to help them. Yeah. You know, other people might not want to help them because of, you know, this language we've been hearing. And then it gives serial killers the freaking opportunity.
Right. And I just think that, you know, there's a lot of situations where, you know, we don't have to choose to, you know, nitpick every little comment that we make. But I feel like it's important to know the difference between making conscious choices about your language and being a snowflake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which is, it's annoying because everyone calls you a snowflake now if you don't want to say the wrong thing. But I
don't think I'm a snowflake for not wanting to refer to these women as hookers.
Yeah.
I feel like devaluing them, it doesn't bring me up. It doesn't do anything to improve their situation or anyone else's. So
yeah. Same with everyone. Same with everything you say.
Right.
Like just be conscious of how it makes people feel. That's all.
That's our soapbox. So who the fuck were we talking about?
I don't remember.
Steve the Gambler? Some
Did he gamble a lot? Is that
no, I don't even know.
He just showed up. I'm Steve the Gambler.
I'm Steve the Gambler. No, he didn't give himself that nomenclature. He just said his name was Steve. So his arrest for murder was precipitated by the very brutal and surprisingly public slaying of his last victim. Oh. We are actually going to, in episode 2, get into kind of the lingering effects, literally decades later, of the people that really, that bore witness to what happened to this last victim.
They saw it?
Yes. There were several victims. Or, oh my God.
I was like, wait,
there were several victims, but there were several witnesses. No, this was, this is why I say this would be his eventual downfall, that he became so overconfident, because when you get cocky, you make mistakes and you do things that in your wildest dreams you would not do. And we are so going to get there. There were so many witnesses, and the account of how he was identified is just fucking wild.
Ooh.
So Jennifer Lisa Smith was a sex worker and a drug addict. She was also a mother to 2.
No.
As previously stated, Jennifer was exactly the type of woman that Rogers would typically select as a victim. She was with Rogers in his truck, parked in a Denny's parking lot.
Denny's?
A Denny's parking lot off of Southeast McLaughlin Boulevard in Oak Grove on August 7th, 1987.
Ugh.
When he stabbed her 11 times in the breast, abdomen, back, and reportedly also her vagina.
Oh my God.
She tried to fight him off, but her escape was very brief. She was literally running through this parking lot naked.
Oh my God. Was that after she was stabbed? Or?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And
he followed her with a knife. So we're going to get to it.
Denny's
we're going to get to
open
it.
24/7.
We're going to get to
it. How?
Okay. No, I literally have all the deets. I know.
Okay.
So she was with Rogers in his truck, parked in a Denny's parking lot. Literally a Denny's parking lot.
Never liked Denny's.
I can't say that I really care either way, but she tried to fight him off, but her escape was brief. She was attended to by witnesses at the Denny's restaurant as the call was placed for emergency assistance. There were numerous witnesses to the crime, and some of these people are going to break your heart with how hard they fought for her survival and to try to bring her attacker to justice. If, God forbid, something like this ever happens to you or someone you know, you want all of these motherfucking people to be there.
Yeah.
It makes me want to cry every time.
Oh, okay.
As horrible as this case is, these people might just restore your faith in humanity a little bit. Their accounts of the brutal attack are pretty chilling, but I have, as usual, tried to be both mindful and purposeful about what is included in my retelling of the story for you creepy people. Michael Fielding, who was 32 at the time, lived in an apartment nearby. He'd gone to bed a couple of hours earlier, but was awoken when he suddenly heard the muffled screams of a woman that he described as being in intense pain.
Oh.
As he climbed out of bed to peer out the window overlooking the parking lot. So, picture this. It's a Denny's parking lot. They're open at this odd hour, okay? Because it's like 3 o'clock in the morning. It's also right next to an apartment complex.
Wow.
It doesn't get much more public than this.
Like, did he want
and
to
on
get
McLaughlin.
caught?
On McLaughlin.
Oh
This
my
is like a
God.
very major thoroughfare. If you're not from
Yeah.
Oregon, this is a very busy area, heavily trafficked.
It's really like he wanted to be caught. Like,
It kind of is. It
Ugh.
kind of is. So, as he climbed out of bed to peer out the window overlooking the parking lot, the screams became louder.
Oh.
He arrived at the window in time to see a man run beneath a streetlight. Horrifying, because I think we know exactly who that was, who he saw. James Dalkey, who was 50 years old at the time, had just arrived at the Denny's restaurant. He parked his 1983 Ford van and started walking alone toward the restaurant. He heard a woman yelling and screaming, but wasn't exactly sure what she was saying. He did see 2 people in the parking lot. He thought right about kind of where the screams were coming from.
Oh.
Although it was dark, he could see that those 2 people appeared to be struggling with each other. As his eyes slowly adjusted to the dark, he realized a naked woman was lying in the middle of the parking lot.
Oh my God. I cannot even imagine coming across that.
Yeah. A man was kneeling over her, but Dalkey could not immediately determine why. It has been reported that Dayton Leroy Rogers may have been trying to sexually penetrate the victim at this time.
No.
After he had already stabbed her in the vagina.
Oh my God.
A man in a wheelchair, Charles Gates, had just arrived when he also heard the screams. Already outside in the parking lot, he was on his way over to the woman, as was Dalkey. When the man kneeling over the woman saw them approaching, he jumped to his feet and ran in the opposite direction. So that's probably where Michael Fielder sees him running right underneath the streetlight.
Was he naked too?
It doesn't sound like it.
Okay. I was just curious.
Gates reached the woman first. He literally fell from his wheelchair when he realized that her throat had been slit.
Oh my God.
Still, he quickly sprang into action. He was experienced in first aid and emergency medical treatment. This is literally a man in a wheelchair that falls out of his chair in shock and immediately starts administering emergency, fighting to try to save her life.
Dude, I have I have chills right now. Like, this is crazy.
Do you have goosebumps
I
even though
do.
it's about to be 84 degrees outside?
I have goose pimples.
Yeah, I do. I know. All of my hair is standing up. Gates noted immediately that the woman was not breathing and did not respond to any of his questions. He could find no carotid pulse, and the poor woman lay covered in blood, but he immediately began CPR and mouth-to-mouth resuscitation.
Wow.
He is literally amazing. He didn't hesitate. As a first responder, I honestly don't think we could have hoped for more.
Yeah.
This is one of the most incredible stories I think that I've ever heard.
Did he get an award? He got an award.
I don't know. I would like to, I don't know if he is still alive. I'm not sure how old he was at the time of this. I didn't find that reported. I'm sure I could dig. If he is still alive, I would like to go ahead and shake his hand virtually right now. Give him Delta variant.
Here's an award.
If he is no longer with us posthumously, I would like to award him all of the hero, all of them, just all of the medals, all of the things.
Give them all.
Yeah. Meanwhile, several witnesses, including Stan Connor and Richard Bergio, ran to their cars in an attempt to block Rogers' car in the parking lot when Dalkey pointed him out as he was trying to escape. So basically, Dalkey sees Rogers getting back into his truck. He's like, oh my God, there he is. He's trying to get away, which he had a very, very colorful way of apparently saying. I just was having a blast picturing this 50-year-old man like just cursing his brains out because he's fucking livid. However, Rogers drove right over the landscaping and headed south on Southeast McLaughlin. And you probably think, okay, so then he got away. Bitch, try again. Bergio followed Rogers through Milwaukee, Gladstone, Oregon City, and Canby at speeds of up to 100 miles an hour. Finally, Bergio got close enough when the suspect's car pulled into a driveway and was able to copy down the license plate number. At that point, he was satisfied, feeling like he had done all that he could at that. I almost said at that point again. At that point.
I didn't notice.
Jesus.
I'm so enthralled in the story.
I know. It's honestly, this is one of the wildest ones that I think I've ever. It's wild, but it's wild because you think like, wow, if this like happened to you, all of these people did everything. They went above and beyond trying to make sure that this guy, number one, didn't get away. They, administered what they thought would, maybe be life-saving, emergency assistance to this woman. It's an example of what happens when the right person is the witness to a crime. I'm
following him through.
I'm flabbergasted.
How many towns was that? 4 or 5 towns?
Milwaukee, Gladstone, Oregon City, and Canby.
4 towns.
Yeah. So, like I said, at that point, he was satisfied, feeling like he had done all that he could. Literally did everything he could other than maybe approach Rogers. Which that's not a good. That's, no. I don't say that because I feel like he should have done that. Absolutely not.
Don't do that.
Don't do that. Let's be honest, probably more than a lot of people would have done here.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, all of these people, they all were just amazing. So he then returned to the initial crime scene where Clackamas County Sheriff's deputies and a rescue team from the Oak Lodge Fire Department had arrived. Despite the valiant efforts of witnesses and first responders, Jennifer's attacker had escaped for the time, and unfortunately, Jennifer Smith died later at Emmanuel Hospital.
Aww.
Dayton Leroy Rogers was arrested in connection with this crime. It's coming, I swear.
Come on.
While Dayton was being held by law enforcement, a few events unfolded that would ultimately be nails in his coffin. Some of them being nails of the finest metal that were sturdy as hell.
Yeah.
You're with me on that? Gotcha. When detectives John T. Turner and Mike Machado arrived at the crime scene, they were briefed on that morning's horrible events. Turner took the license plate number that was provided by Richard Bergio and ran it through the Oregon State Department of Motor Vehicles computer. You guys, he struck pay dirt on this one.
Nice.
Okay? Because literally, bro took his own truck and commit this very public crime. License plate, Oregon, CYW194. Produced the pickup's registered owner. It was, drumroll please. Okay. It was 33-year-old Dayton Leroy Rogers. Oops. I know, who guessed, right?
Sorry.
Your God.
I messed that one up.
No, I'll go again. It's fine. It was 33-year-old Dayton Leroy Rogers, whose address was listed as 10,500 block of South Hines Road in Canby.
Ooh.
Oh my God. He was so incredibly reckless in this encounter, as previously described, and it would be his undoing. His residence was about 20 miles south of the crime scene, but upon arrival, law enforcement was informed by a relative that Rogers wasn't home, but could likely be found at his auto repair shop in Woodburn, just a few miles south. Apparently, he was cocky enough to think that there was no notes on this crime. Okay? He was cocky enough to think he didn't need to worry about going on the run. Upon arrival, a red-eyed Rogers, stinking of booze, I might add, allowed the homicide investigators into his shop, where he proceeded to make up a bullshit story about an injury that he had sustained to his hand during the attack. Clearly, the injury had been sustained in his encounter with Jenny, not from a saw like he claimed. Medical professionals would confirm later to police that was highly unlikely.
Yeah.
Because the wound would have been more jagged in appearance, and so many other things where the story just didn't make any fucking sense. Because of his vehicle having been positively identified by witnesses as the one fleeing the scene, and his suspicious behavior during the encounter with law enforcement when they showed up to his shop, Rogers was arrested and taken to the Clackamas County Jail in Oregon City on suspicion of murder. Ugh, the county jail. It's right next to all of the best restaurants in Oregon City, and I'm just So, cause he had done fucked up real bad this time.
Yeah.
So
you could say that.
Yeah. So law enforcement continued their investigation. I do have a funny anecdote about when they showed up to his house to arrest him.
Okay.
I debated about whether or not I should include this. So you can see I have this note. Case notes. Question mark. So Roy Miller was Dayton Leroy Rogers' father-in-law. He saw the police pull up to the back end of the property, and his daughter was home alone. It was really early in the morning. It was around like 5 a.m.
And this was still his wife, right? They were still married.
Yes,
at this
so
point?
this was Dayton Leroy Rogers. His wife was in their home.
Okay.
Her father lived on basically an adjacent property. He just sees two vehicles pull up to their house in the dark, and he knows his daughter is home alone. He starts literally shooting his shotgun into the air.
Oh my God.
Because he thought they were prowlers.
Yeah.
So,
well, yeah, you would.
So his daughter, Dayton Leroy Rogers' wife, has to come out of the house, and she can see from where she's at that it's police officers' vehicles.
Oh.
She's like, "Oh, this is not great. Not a good look.
Daddy, put your gun down."
Yeah. And he's not shooting at them,
Yeah.
but he's shooting very nearby up into the air, which, that is inherently dangerous on its own.
Yeah.
But so she literally has to go out, approach the officers and be like, "I'm so sorry. That was my dad. He thought you guys were prowlers. He cannot see from his house that those are law enforcement vehicles." So, and they didn't really believe her right away. So she calls her dad and says, "Dad, can you, tell them?" And I think he ends up walking next door and being like, "I'm so sorry." It doesn't sound like he was charged with anything.
That's good.
They probably could have, but what are you going to do? You're a dad. Of course you're going to try to protect your daughter.
If they roll on a private property unannounced, what are you
kind of scary
supposed to do?
Yeah. I mean, probably don't do that.
I guess you're not really technically allowed to shoot your gun
Yeah, just not like willy-nilly up in
Yeah,
the air.
yeah.
So
Okay.
just a
Well,
brief aside. Just a little funsy story there. So it's just funny that out of all of the encounters that law enforcement had that morning, Dayton Leroy Rogers basically goes away peacefully, but when they go to his house, they're told to stand down, but it's his father-in-law that he's trying to protect his daughter. I just thought that was kind of hilarious.
That's great.
So on August 31st, we're just fast forwarding a little bit here, of 1987, a bow hunter stumbled across a badly decomposed body while on a steep, brushy slope of a privately owned timber farm 10 miles southeast of Molalla.
Wow.
Over the next 5 days, searchers from the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office and a local Explorer Scout post would find 6 more decomposed bodies, all women and all nude, along the same hillside, less than 100 yards from one another.
Damn. It was just like his dumping ground.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Authorities were soon calling these the Molalla Forest Murders. It's the worst serial murder in Oregon history, which when I read that, I was like, I bet Brutos was pissed.
Oh, yeah.
But honestly, fuck both of these guys.
Right.
Am I right? Yeah. Okay. Detective Turner was still working on Dayton Leroy's case when he received a call from a Canby minister who had spoken to Roy Miller, Mr. Shooty up in the air guy. That's his father-in-law. Roy Miller found what he thought were some troubling items inside the wood stove at Dayton's shop.
Interesting.
He had been instructed by Dayton from the jail to close his business for good and had since been sorting through items at the shop to ensure their safe return to customers. Miller, this is Dayton's father-in-law, had loaned him the money to open the shop years prior. The closure of the business was to become a devastating financial loss to the elderly man.
Oh.
Just literally one more person who was victimized by this monster.
Yeah.
I mean, if not perhaps as violently as his more vulnerable female victims, I just thought that's just another sad piece of this story. So during a phone conversation with the then jailed Dayton, Miller was questioned about what areas of the shop had been searched by law enforcement. Bathrooms, his clothing that remained inside, the wood stove. After sensing both a sharp and dark change in Dayton's tone, Miller had decided to check the wood stove for himself. So he noticed that it was the same way a scent dog alerts.
Ooh.
And he was like, the wood stove thing seemed to be that was a big deal. His tone changed, his mood changed. Okay, I'm going to check this out.
Yeah.
He ran a magnet through the wood stove and uncovered small metal remnants from various women's clothing and jewelry.
Oh.
The poor man seemed concerned, feeling a little bit disillusioned about his previous perception of his son-in-law as a normal guy. So remember, this is something that he had basically told his pastor. And the pastor then was like, I think that, you need to reach out to law enforcement. And Roy was like, I just don't know how to do this. And the minister, just being, such a sweet guy, he's like, okay, let's do this together. And they call and basically tell them this is kind of what he's found. He feels really conflicted about even coming forward, but he just feels like he doesn't know who his son-in-law is anymore.
Yeah.
All of this is very confusing for him. I can't financially
imagine.
Devastated, the emotional turmoil. This is my daughter's husband.
I can't imagine how she's feeling.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Oh.
No, none of it's good. So Rogers was convicted in 1988 for the murder of his last victim, Jennifer Lisa Smith, whom he killed on August 7th, 1987. So this is something that Chris and I actually talked about when I was info dumping on him while I was writing the notes and then when he later read them. What's interesting about Dayton Leroy Rogers in terms of how they chose to prosecute him was that Jennifer Lisa Smith's case was such an absolute slam dunk.
Yeah.
That they tried him and convicted him for that murder. Shortly after she was killed and he had been basically remanded, the other bodies were discovered. Oh. And there was a lot of damning evidence that it was him, but some of it wasn't. It wasn't the slam dunk that Jennifer's case was. Oh, no. So they did decide to basically approach those cases separately. So he was tried for Jennifer Lisa Smith's killing and then separately for all of the other victims. So in May of 1989, Rogers was convicted for the murders of 23-year-old Lisa Marie Mock, 26-year-old Maureen Ann Hodges, 35-year-old Christine Lotus Adams, 20-year-old Cynthia DeVore, 26-year-old Nondes Noni Cervantes, and 16-year-old Ryatha Giles. When the bodies of several of his victims were discovered, Rogers was not even initially a suspect. So,
wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was a good thing, definitely, that they approach these cases as totally separate because, like I said, Jennifer's case, total slam dunk. Yeah. There is so much evidence, eyewitness statements, all of that ties him to that crime. That is open and shut.
Get this guy thrown in jail.
Right. And there's a fair preponderance of evidence in the other case, but it's apples and oranges. Yeah. So
did they tie all of that like jewelry and stuff that they found in his
I don't know how much of it they were able to directly tie to those other victims, but so again, like I said, he wasn't even considered a suspect initially with those additional victims. That is, until an evidence search of the dump site that was previously mentioned revealed that the ground was littered with small individual containers of orange juice and miniature vodka bottles. What? Now, this is something that had you heard about this case anywhere else, you'd already know. This is circumstantial evidence, but it links all of these victims to Dayton. There were multiple sex workers that identified him as being someone who always carried around these miniature bottles of orange juice and vodka, and he would make screwdrivers in his truck.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating detail that, they were able to pick up. And then they're like, wait a second. I think this guy did all of these other crimes too.
Oh my gosh.
So this was as good as a signature. Rogers was almost never without his combination of items in his truck, the little miniature vodka bottles and the individual servings of orange juice.
I mean, who doesn't roll around with those in their truck?
Yeah. So of course, this was not the only evidence that was gathered against him. For these additional murders, he was sentenced to death. Skipping ahead just a couple more decades, as of 2006, he had been on and off death row for decades already, while his attorneys filed a series of appeals. Then 7 years later, his seventh victim was identified in August of 2013. He currently resides on Oregon's death row at the Oregon State Penitentiary. I hate pretty much everything about this case except for that, if I'm being honest. In episode 2, we are going to look a little bit closer about that little factoid I kind of just tried to drop in there. Ooh, nice and light. Ooh. That as of 2006, he had been on and also off death row for decades. We're going to get into it because honestly, the court case is a very interesting aspect of of Dayton Leroy Rogers.
Okay, yeah.
You're gonna see.
I'd love to hear about that.
It is wild.
Ooh.
I'm not kidding. Okay, so oh my gosh, the tarot. Wow. I was like, okay, let's be done with this. Goodbye.
Bye.
Okay, so I feel like the part that really stands out to me in the reverse interpretation of this is, and it sounds weird at first, but benevolence, compassion, credit. I feel like that just speaks to me about the first responder people. It's just like the compassionate hearts that they have. But what's interesting about this is this very short description. It says also confusion to enemies, obstruction, and immaturity. There's Dayton.
Yeah.
Somehow he managed to come through.
Oh my goodness.
It's really interesting. I look at the card itself and I'm like, I feel like Dayton would really hate this.
Oh yeah,
so I love
for
it.
sure.
All right, so I think we've kind of covered everything here. Does that feel right?
I think so. Unless you creepy people have any input, you can
Yeah.
let us know.
Yeah. So I do have a message leading into episode 2.
Okay.
I'm honestly more excited about episode 2 than like who even cares about Dayton Leroy Rogers? Let's just get into the episode 2 is our relief, but it made me think, there's that saying, keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
Mm-hmm.
And you know how we feel about chapstick. So I have devised an alternate phrasing. Keep your friends close, your chapstick closer, and Dayton Leroy Rogers on death row in the Oregon State Penitentiary.
Yes.
Yay!
Love it.
All right, guys. So I think that's a wrap for us. Cool.
Oh, I didn't tell you this. We had a request by our very special listener, Hannah, to bring back Never Bundy.
Never Bundy?
Like as a catchphrase at the
okay.
end. So I think we should just start tagging on the catchphrases.
Yeah, we just have all of it. See, here's the problem is I think sometimes we think sometimes we're like, oh, I like this sign off or like this little phrase or whatever, but then I can never remember what I said 15 minutes ago, let alone last recording. So,
yeah.
Okay, Hannah, this one's for you.
Never Bundy. Have a creepy ass day. See you next Tuesday.
So for all of you that are listening, if you have any true crime or paranormal stories that you want us to share, maybe with the whole Pacific Northwest.
Yes, we would love to read them on the pod.
Yes, we will read them out loud.
Not just in our heads.
Yes. They don't have to be from the Pacific Northwest if you would like to share. Email us at pnwhuntsandhomicides@gmail.com. It's all spelled out, no special characters. Super duper easy peasy.
Follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Same thing as the email at pnwhuntsandhomicides, all spelled out, no special characters. Please also rate and review us on whatever platform you're listening to, and check out our stories on social media because our meme game is hot.
Agreed.
And if you agree, like Caitlin, you can also find us on Patreon and support the show.
Bitchin'. arguably the most infamous. Oh shit, no, I can't. I tried inserting and that never works.
Don't insert.
Don't insert. Oof.